and welcome to this week's session 4 of series 3, Maternity and Midwifery Out. Huge welcome to everybody. Great that you could make it this evening. It's going to be a really good evening, as it always is, but every week gets even better every time. My name's Sue Mcdonald, and I'm the curator of these hours, as well as the Maternity and Midwifery Festival. So it's my honour to be with you this evening. As many of you will know, these sessions were designed around the time of the COVID outbreak pandemic, really to make sure we could provide some continuing profession development sessions for midwives, for student midwives, and people who wanted to learn more about maternity services and maternity care. And because you can feel very isolated when the work is so heavy, and we have to say a huge thanks to Matflix to making sure that they're delivered through to you. They're the experts. I always have to say at this point, these is the place to go for your revalidation and for your CPD needs. Or if you just have an essay or an assignment to write, this is the place to go. They have a huge amount of information for everyone. Anyway, tonight I'm joined by Professor Julia Sanders and Mark Williams, and I'm sure these two people are well known to many of you, and I'm really pleased they're with us to look at parents' voices and dads' voices, the two together, which is really nice. I always start now with a little moment of the week, so I'm going to ask my guests to share a moment of the week, which could be something special that's happened this week to either of them. So should we start with Julia?
Yes, thank you, and welcome everybody. It's so lovely to be with you all this evening. I'm actually really lucky because I'm still working clinically, and my moment of the week was just fantastic, and it just set the scene of how important families are in maternity care. And I was privileged enough to be caring for a woman who herself had COVID. So unfortunately, her children couldn't visit her. And she had her newborn baby, and she zoomed over to her children who were at home, and the shrieks of excitement and joy at these siblings seeing the first images of their new sibling was just delightful, and it just reminded me of these moments are so special, and we need to capture them and hold them dear to us.
And I think especially this week, Julia, that's a lovely moment. So are you meaning they actually zoomed with a Zoom like we're doing tonight?
Just like we did tonight, yeah. So rather than just sending a photograph of the
lovely
of the new baby, I could see the children at home, and they could see their new sibling, and it was, in fact, the first I knew that she was set this up was literally hearing the shrieks coming out from these little children at home.
Wonderful. This is really being a midwife. Fantastic. Thank you so much, Julia. How about Mark? Have you a moment of the week?
Yeah, well, I've just managed to get out my attic more this week, which is great. I've been up here since March. My wife lets me out now and again, but I think the snow. I'm lucky living in the valleys. You know, we've got the mountains, and I've been doing a lot more walking since lockdown. So just walking and seeing the snow on the mountains is absolutely beautiful up the valleys. So yeah, that's my moment of the week. Snow.
Okay, that's fabulous. Thank you so much for two lovely moments. I've got now a picture in my mind of a family all squeaking and squealing with Julia, and I bet Julia squeaked and squealed too. And then Mark in all this snowy landscape. And I have to say, but I love that your accents so restful and lovely. So thank you for joining us this evening.
Thank you.
Now, I'm going now just to go through the sort of things that we normally talk about, because we're here because of COVID rather than meeting face to face. We're still in lockdown, everybody, and the statistics and the images at the moment are very grim. The numbers of infections of COVID are going down a little bit. Death rates have hit a new high, and that is awful. And obviously this week, the big news was that it hit over 100,000 people. And that's not just the people who we've lost, it's their families who've been affected, their friends, and all that, you know, that goes with that, and the people looking after them. It means the NHS is under immense pressure and stress. And we need to really remember that and think about our colleagues in the intensive care, in accident emergency, and in the general wards, looking after people who are sick. And we need to remember actually that we've had quite a lot of health service people who've died through COVID. And I am aware that 9 midwives have died over the period of time as well, and maternity care support workers. So you'll notice we've got a little candle on the screen, and partly that is for the Holocaust Memorial Day, but also we felt it was the right thing just to mark thinking about all those people we've lost in the UK over this period of this terrible virus. Very sad, and we need to support ourselves, we need to support our colleagues, because the trauma is intense and it's harsh. So big thanks again to our colleagues across the health service who are doing such work and being so fantastic and showing care and compassion, even though they are stretched to the limit, and they're fantastic. And a big hug to them, and also to our maternity care colleagues, maternity service colleagues, who are carrying on with, you know, providing maternity care to mums and babies, just as Julia was describing, and making sure that women and their babies are safe, and families feel that they're safe as well. And we'll send some healing thoughts to anyone who's got COVID at the moment, or long COVID, and good wishes to everyone who's listening, really. Keep well, that's the message tonight. And thank you also to key workers, all the key workers, for all that you are doing to keep things going. And I know I always say this every week, but I think we need to keep remembering there's a heck of a lot of people out there working, going in, day out, to keep us looked after and safe ourselves. So we need to remember that. Now, I've got the news this week, and I've shared the sort of 100,000 death rate, which is a horrible bit of news. Positive things, the vaccinations are well underway, and we've hit over 7 million vaccinations for older people, care workers, healthcare workers, and that's really fantastic. So well done to all those people who are providing that service at the moment. Today is International Holocaust Memorial Day, and I know there's been a lot on the radio and a lot on TV about that, and remembering the sort of intolerance and hatred that was shown to the Jewish people at that time and other people in the world. So you might wish to light a candle. I've got my own candle ready for 8 o'clock to put in your window. Do choose something that's safe. Don't set fire to your house. If you have an electric candle, well, that's fantastic. And at 8 o'clock, that is the time that we're meant to be remembering those people and thinking, let's get some peace and love around the place, and tolerance. It's so important. We've got enough to deal with the COVID without all the hatred that is also around the place. Just 2 other snippets of news. The Embrace report is still available, and there's a publication called Turning the Tide, the experience of Black, Asian and minority ethnic NHS staff working in maternity services in England during COVID and beyond. It's been compiled by Gloria Rowland, MBE, who many of you will know, and it's been published and it's available online. You will notice on the resource page, all of these resources are available, and most of them you can get online. So that's fantastic, a little bit of reading for us all to know more about the service we're working in. Now this hour, we're going to be looking at the experience of parents, mums and dads, looking after their children and their babies and looking after themselves. And I'm very delighted that I've got 2 fantastic speakers who are going to share their knowledge and their expertise with us. we're kind of focusing a little bit on perinatal mental health, and particularly initially the first one on dads. And dads sometimes get a bit neglected. I'm sure Mark's going to say this, but they're an important part of the family unit. And if dad's feeling anxious or depressed, that can impact on mum. It can also impact if mum's depressed on dad. So we need to look at the whole family together. And by supporting dads, we support mums and the growing family and the developing family. So I'm really delighted that Mark's with us this evening. Mark Williams, and many of you will know Mark. He was awarded the Inspirational Father of the Year at the Pride of Britain Awards. Pretty impressive, but shows how far he has come since the birth of his son in 2004, Ethan. Or Ethan?
Ethan, yeah.
Ethan,
that's it.
And you say it much more beautifully. And he's come through, and his whole CV, and both CVs are online, and there's a lot more. I'm just getting edited highlights. He's had a career in sales management and training, and he became involved in mental health sector after his wife, Michelle, had experience with postnatal depression and birth trauma, and his own experience with depression following the birth of his child. Now, he's spoken at conferences and study days, and he's published very widely on the topic. Some of those are on the reference list. Oh, there's a book, one's a book, and one's a report that he's recently published. So I'm really so delighted he's with us this evening. So welcome, Mark. Now the screen is all yours, and you've already got it.
Yeah. Hi guys, hope you're all okay. Most importantly, you're okay. Like you said, I'm known for fathers, but actually campaign for all parents really. And he started a campaign for the mother baby unit in Wales. And as you know, hopefully that's going to come back this year. So that closed in 2013. So I believe that if you support all parents for their mental health, it just has far better outcomes for the whole family and that child's development. So like Sue said, I come from a lived experience first, and then working with parents, and also working with Dr. Jane Handley. And with that mix, I've got the knowledge of the parents as well, you know, which is vital. So my story starts like from all parents have a past history of anxiety or depression, you know, and mine was undiagnosed with ADHD before when I was in school. So I had an undiagnosed disorder, and I struggled and self-managed that all my life. I was only diagnosed at 40 years of age. So I was pretty successful in sales. I didn't know nothing about mental health, totally didn't know nothing about mental health. So after 22 hours labor, I remember the doctors came rushing in and they said, Mr. Williams, your wife needs emergency C-section. And it was the first time I actually had a panic attack. I've never had a panic attack like that ever since. And when I went into the labor ward and what I witnessed, it was horrific. And, you know, seeing my wife, and I honestly thought my wife and baby was going to die in that situation. And I've worked in secure units. I witnessed really bad things in my life, but still to this day, nothing was worse thinking my wife and baby was going to die, because I felt out of control. I felt helplessness. Michelle went on to have severe postnatal depression, where she was in crisis team. But we realized now there's an overlap between PTSD from the symptoms, which actually goes into the postnatal period. So a lot of mums and dads, well, dads now as well, you know, if you witness or experience a life-threatening event, that is PTSD. So PTSD is an anxiety disorder, either witnessing or experiencing a life-threatening event. And then we know some of the symptoms, severe symptoms, which is nightmares, flashbacks. But like I said, it's an anxiety disorder. So my personality totally changed in the first year of fatherhood. I couldn't tell my wife how I was starting to feel, because my wife is in crisis team. I didn't want to impact on her mental health. I went from, you know, expecting to be back in work in 2 weeks, self-employed. It took me 6 months to get back in work. And even then, I weren't the same person, because when I went back into sales, tried to get back in sales, I couldn't take the pressures anymore. And all of a sudden, we talk about isolation. For me personally, I've never felt so isolated in the first year of fatherhood. I didn't initially bond with my son initially, but I think that bonding and attachment grew, because as we know, when that's skin to skin, it can release oxytocin, which is good for the baby and dads as well. So all these things I was doing, which I didn't know about, because when my wife unfortunately was unwell in bed, it was only me and my son Ethan. So my bond attachment did really grow really quick. And I'm pleased to say he's doing well, fantastic now in school and stuff. But going back to that experience, my personality totally changed in that first year of fatherhood. I remember punching a sofa, bust my hand. As we know, a lot of men suppress those feelings, and that comes out in all sorts of ways sometimes as well. So I was using alcohol as a coping skill. I was lucky, there's a lot of families haven't got that family support. So my mother-in-law came to live with us, and that helped so much. And I have my own family, but I couldn't tell him how I was starting to feel because I didn't want the attention taken away from my wife either. So I struggled on for years. And like I said, I've written a book about it, which explains more. And the most important thing I want to share with you tonight is actually the research, which shows why we should be supporting all parents for their mental health as well. We know the biggest killer of men under 50 is suicide. And yet we know now there's high risk of suicide in new fathers. But like me, because there was no screening on early prevention support in place, a lot of men will get diagnosed with anxiety or depression after the perinatal period. And as a mental health advocate, I used to come across mums who had PTSD or postnatal depression from years ago. And when I met them in the secure units, nobody had ever asked them or screened them. But we know perinatal mental health has certainly come a long way in the last 10 years, I would definitely say, because a lot of people used to say postnatal depression or baby blues, but we know perinatal mental health is the big umbrella. So my experience basically changed when I was actually working in the youth sector. I started changing my local youth club, and it was a lot of young suicides in Bridgend, the area. So I started educating myself more about mental health. I started going into the sector, but I still didn't get the help during that period because I thought if I went to the doctors, it'd be on my notes and I would never get a job in mental health. So I suppressed those feelings, and eventually I lost my grandfather, and my mother was diagnosed with cancer in a short space of time. And then a timeline of trauma, basically, I just couldn't cope anymore. Now, I was physically fit during this time. I was doing a lot of kickboxing at the time, but mentally, it was actually impacting on my physical health, pins and needles, all these aches and pains. And what really changed my life was meeting a gentleman in the gym. And I was working in a hospital called T. Catherine at the time. And he said, can I bother weights? I said, yeah. I got to go to NHS Prams, he said. And I said, oh, what's NHS Prams? And he said, oh, my wife's got postnatal depression. And I said, oh my gosh, my wife had postnatal depression too. And within 5 minutes, side by side, because I feel men talk better side by side, and that's why a lot of people are doing walk and talk groups now as well. I told him more things in 5 minutes than I told my best friends and my wife, because he related to me, understood. I didn't feel that he was going to be any judgment. And back then, it was a bigger stigma than it is now. I think mental health has gone, more awareness has grown, more people are talking about it, I would say in the last 4 years. But certainly back when I started, it was certainly, fathers with postnatal depression, it was a even bigger stigma. So postnatal depression, when you look at all the evidence and research and any professor in the field, there's no really strong evidence that it is hormonal. That is one of the factors that possibly, yes, it is. But there's a testosterone change in fathers during this time as well. But some of the risk factors, as we know, is fathers with undiagnosed disorders like bipolar, schizophrenia, ASD, ADHD, they self-managing that. Then the lack of sleep. As we know, the lack of sleep can even cause psychosis as well. If you sleep is so important to your mental health. And then if you witness a traumatic birth, or some fathers I speak to go for a loss, and as midwives, you know what parents go through, and yet they don't get that support. And I even spoke to somebody today, a lady, where she had lots of support for a loss of a child, but the father would never ask for his mental health, nothing. And that can impact the mum's mental health. And so many relationships can fail because of this as well. So when I said a father's reaching out, it was only to support fathers with their partners with postnatal depression. But what was happening? The mums would phone me up and say, Mark, I'm fine, but my husband is struggling since the birth of my son or daughter. Can he come to the group? So after sharing my own experience, the fathers were talking about all sorts of things, which I didn't know about either. So I was lucky to start working with Dr. Jane Handley then in 2011. And then Jane was educating me where we were talking about paternal OCD. Now, paternal OCD, like dads and mums, they get the intrusive thoughts they can do something to the baby. They take themselves out of the situation and then they go down the pub. You know, dads don't change the nappy for reasons. The thoughts they're getting, sometimes they've been abused in a bath. It could be from past history. So there's loads of reasons. So what we got to look at is, why are men behaving like they are sometimes as well? Because like I said, in my work I've done with parents, I found parents that, or dads, who actually the relationship have failed. Then there's all sorts of problems related relationships. It could be a lack of sex, because the fact is that the father's gone through witnessing a trauma or seeing a partner's go through a crisis, and then he doesn't want to have sex with his partner again because he doesn't want another baby. And that's my experience, because I didn't want to have another child. Prior to that, I wanted 2 or 3 children, you know. So the relationship is really important to get the communication with parents together as well, because, you know, when mum's going for a vulnerable time and thinking, oh, my partner doesn't want sex. I mean, sometimes the father doesn't want to have sex with a partner because the simple fact he doesn't want her to go for that trauma. Antenatal is so important as well, which is not talked about in fathers. So if you've got a father like myself, or if, say, Michelle become pregnant, and now my anxiety now is going to be higher in the antenatal period, because now I've got to go into a labour ward where I witnessed that trauma. And as we know, a smell can trigger off that trauma as well. The other thing as well is important to know that communication is vital as well. We need to communicate as well because some dads, they just want to have a chat and tell them the process. You know, emergency C-section used to be used. It was CAP 1, 2, 3 now. You know, emergency. So if you've got a dad on the ASD spectrum and you've got noises going off and somebody says emergency C-section, and, you know, somebody saying, oh, say goodbye to your wife as she's getting rushed down the theatre, in his mind, he's overthinking and he's thinking that his wife. So communication and preparing dads is vital as well. That's most importantly. So postnatal depression in fathers, that's the big thing. You know, we know by research, it's actually 1 in 10, but we know it's far higher because it was 1 in 10 for years for mums. But once we start screening and getting the data in place, that's when we know how high it is, because up to 39% of fathers were concerned about their mental health. And that's the Mental Health Foundation, 2018. 38% of fathers were concerned about worried about their mental health. That's the NTT report. That's all in my report I showed. And one thing what I did started to do was start to raise awareness. Oh, my slides are stuck. 1 second. So I started raising awareness on TV and radio stations because I thought I needed to get this out there to educate people that it does happen to a father, any fathers, for any groups. So going back to what I was saying about the reports as well, November did a report, and it said that 1 in 5 British fathers felt they lost connections with their best friends during the first year of fatherhood. So we know by the evidence now what's coming out as well. And one of the things I've done in this report, so you can all access this report as well, because I know Julia's speaking later on, so I want to make sure Julia gets time. It's probably the hardest thing to do a 15-minute talk, because I can talk about it. So I'm trying to get as much information as I can in 15 minutes. But if you look at the report, it gets all the evidence in our report as well. And that's from professors, doctors from around the world. And we want an inquiry and embrace report inquiry, because we feel that we don't know how many fathers go on to take their lives during the perinatal period as well, and afterwards as well. And even though that John Clayton, an academic, he had PhD, and his wife did a lot of awareness around this during his time, and he threw a party and he took his life. He died through suicide. So once we start, more men are talking about mental health now, we'll feel that there'll be more fathers be talking about their mental health as well. And I know a couple of people like Scott, a couple of people like I share with you are doing some amazing things as well. And that's when we need other fathers to speak out about it. So part of the report, MBI rates are higher in dads as well than non-fathers. When you look at the child line in men, depression is up to 20% or more than non-fathers, if that makes sense as well. So, and like I said, what happens is then with when they do get that help, they only get certain treatment, talking therapies. With PTSD, and sometimes those treatments are different as well. So the biggest thing that happens as well, as we know, with adverse childhood experiences as well, if we support both parents with their mental health, we can actually lower adverse childhood experiences. The other factors that comes in as well, what I want to say is, sorry, my chain of thought just went then, sorry, Bess, my chain of thought just went then, sorry. I would recommend you look at the still face experiment on dads. And that's why, so my work is, it is known for fathers, but it's all about parents really. If we can support both parents in the antenatal period, then it has far better outcomes for the whole family and that child's development as well. We know fatherhood is totally changed now as well. So there's more stay-at-home dads, there's single dads, and we got to talk about same gender parents as well, which is being missed. So even though I'm known for fathers, I'm not just fathers, I'm parents really. And you have a look at the Equality Act in 2010. I feel in years to come, we'll be looking back at this thinking, why didn't we look at fathers? Why do we include fathers in and why didn't they not get the help that other parents or mums are getting? Because like I've said, the mums phone me up mostly and say, Mark, I'm fine. But my husband's mental health or partner's mental health is actually impacted on my mental health. So what happens when I got depressed and had a breakthrough? My wife's depression came back then because now she was caring for me and worried about me. So if we can get a more holistic approach early on, it can save services. It can, you know, the economic report on the Maternal Mental Health Alliance says mum and baby. You know, it doesn't include dad. But what I'm saying is, when you look at our economic report, there's a cost factor. But the most importantly, I know it can lower suicide rates in men, because a lot of men, we know that's higher because of stigma. And I know about the stigma coming from Bridgend Valleys, is a lot of men will drink themselves to death. They will smash the car up. So that's only recorded as an act of suicide. We know it's far higher than that as well. Sorry, how am I doing for time? Sorry, am I okay? I'm okay, sorry for that. So yeah, that's the joys of working in the attic. I should have put a clock up here, sorry, apologise. But going back what I was saying, so like you say, if dad is supported and prepared as well, then, you know, and feels confident, then like you said, that can really improve the child's development. So I give an example is if mum has been at work all day, dad's come home and he hasn't had that practice of changing nappy, and unintentionally when the parents may say, oh, give me the nappy you, or give me the baby you're too slow. Even little things like that can actually not engage dads, and dads move away. So we have to engage fathers in the antenatal, you know, antenatal classes for dads. The other thing I want to share with you as well is the OCD is a big factor, but out of everything, I feel birth trauma is huge, big, massive. And there's a video I did with Michelle O'Dent and on BBC. It's on called Dads in a Labour Ward. Please have a look at that. And I think out of all the work I've done, more I think of it now, because my wife, even though Michelle was diagnosed with severe postnatal depression, when she did get that specialist support later on, it was a lot to do. When they did the timeline of trauma, it was a birth experience was the most traumatic out of everything. And what like I said, what I witnessed, I was, you know, I used to wake up thinking my wife and baby had died. I'd have thoughts, not so much like some fathers I speak to, and even things, you know, can trigger off, like I said, you know. So, you know, I've had that support, but we need other fathers as well to share their experience and give them the permission, because it's a big myth that men don't talk, massive myth. If you put fathers in a safe place who somebody understands and give them that time, I know from experience, men don't shut up. Honestly, they will carry on and carry on. And once they do open up, like myself, it's like a genie bottle. You can't stop talking about it then. But I think we've come a long way in mental health in general and perinatal mental health as well. But like you said, I'm not going to I want to give Julia obviously time to speak as well. So please have a look at the report as well. And it's got loads of information on there. And actually got a film coming out now in March. So I'm hoping that will help parents as well. And so, you know, if you want any information, please just let me know as well. And I'm sure we'll be asking questions later on. Is that okay?
Perfect. We already have a question. We have to save it for after Julia. That's the order it has to be. But thank you so much, Mark. I mean, it's interesting that your comment about the same-sex partners, because of course you could have the same issue with any partner, because they're not kind of in our framework of care naturally, are they?
Yeah.
You know, they're extra to the mother and the baby. But we'll explore that in a mo anyway. Well, we now have Professor Julia Sanders, who I'm delighted that she's with us this evening. She's a midwife, as you know now, and a nurse, a researcher and professional leader. She has a joint post between Cardiff University and Cardiff and Vale University Health Board, and she really does bring research into practice, as she's already illustrated. She's the chief investigator for a funded pool study, which is due to complete this year. So I'm sure we'll hear about that later in the year, perhaps. And she's recently completed this newly published WRISK study into users' experiences of COVID-19 maternity service changes. And that's a Cardiff University stroke BPAS project supported by the Wellcome Trust. So, and a really important piece of work that's come out. So I'm really so pleased Julia can share that with us this evening. So welcome, Julia, and the screen is now yours.
Thank you. Thank you. I'll just check they're working. Yes, so thank you, and thank you so much, Mark, for your talk. And I think we really need to remember the role of fathers and partners and the wider family. Oh, can't you? Sorry. Let me go back. I think I just popped my PowerPoint up rather than sharing them. Share screen. Let's try that. Share. Here we go. Let's try this one instead. How does that look? Does that look better? Lovely, thank you. So what I'm going to share with you this evening is the results of a survey that we conducted looking at women's experiences of socially distanced maternity care. This was part of a study. The WRISK project was actually funded by the Wellcome Trust, and originally the funding and the main study was to look at women's experiences of public health messaging and how they receive messages about public health, and how as professionals we can better communicate those risk messages with women. But of course, halfway through the project, COVID and coronavirus happened. And we felt that as a team, we really couldn't miss the opportunity to capture women's experiences of this as well. So just to sort of think back to nearly this time last year, the incredibly rapid change that happened to maternity services as a result of COVID-19, and the whole of the NHS in the UK and maternity services suddenly made very drastic changes to their services, and a lot of the family orientated care was actually just wiped away within days. We moved as much as we could to virtual consultations, so women weren't being seen and partners weren't being seen face to face anymore. We actually reduced the number of antenatal checkups and postnatal checkups for women, and home visits were reduced. So perhaps reducing those opportunities for really developing relationships. And importantly, in our hospitals, we severely restricted access to partners and other visitors, so that included families as well. And of course, all these things were put in place with an aim of protecting mothers and babies and staff. And at that time, there was real uncertainty about to the extent to which COVID would hit in the UK. We had no idea how many staff would be affected and be either off sick themselves, needing time off because their family or their child was unwell, or staff were needing to shield. So these services were being changed really without really knowing how many staff were going to need to be off. We also really had no idea of the numbers of very sick women that we would see, or the numbers of women that were COVID positive that we'd be looking after. And we also there was real fear over COVID, and we were very unsure about the infection control measures that were needed. And also at that time, there were shortages of the protection that we needed in terms of masks, and everyone was very worried indeed. So by the spring sort of came and went, and everyone settled into this new pattern of virtual working and restricted visiting. And so, but by the time June came, we felt it was really important to try and capture women's experiences of these radical changes to the service. We did actually apply for funding to have a broader piece of work which captured partners and healthcare professionals as well. But unfortunately, we didn't get that funded. So we thought, what can we do with the resources that we've got? So that's why the survey was restricted just to women. So we put this out on SurveyMonkey and just asked for women that were either pregnant or had experienced pregnancy care or birth care during the pandemic. So that was since March to participate. So we were asked for women who were over 16 who'd been pregnant and were living in the United Kingdom. And of course, unfortunately, because of the nature of the survey, women needed to be able to communicate in English. We had run the main public health survey the year before and had huge numbers of responses. So we actually, it sounds awful, but we actually kept this one quite quiet. But so we weren't inundated with data, and we just left this survey ticking along quietly on the internet, and we had just over 500 responses. So the women that responded, around a third of them had actually given birth, and the remainder were still pregnant or had sadly lost their pregnancy. Around just under half were expecting their first baby, and as you'd expect, and quite representative, around a quarter of the women had an underlying medical condition, and about 40% of women were also receiving some obstetric care. There's some details here about the participants. Generally, as often is the case with surveys, unfortunately, Black and ethnic minority groups was rather underrepresented. But what was important to us is we were hearing some women's voices, and hopefully they could share their experiences. So firstly, we asked women about just the general social distancing measures in the United Kingdom. Pregnant women had been put in this category that they should practice what was termed stringent social distancing. So that kind of sounded like they needed to do a little bit more than everybody else, but they were never quite defined as a group that needed to shield. So that was a group that were considered very high risk. And the result of that we found really, so just 40% of women said that they actually found that advice quite confusing. And nearly 1 in 5 said they found it very unclear and confusing. So there was real problems with women understanding what is it that I'm supposed to do as a pregnant woman to protect myself. But in public health messaging, one of the principles that's used is it's called the Precautionary Principle, and that's the same principle as, you know, better to be safe than sorry. And actually, women expressed that they understood that the knowledge about COVID-19 was very limited, that there were lots and lots of unanswered questions about how it would affect people in general and how it would affect pregnant women and their newborn babies. And actually women appreciated that that caution was to be expected. And this is a quote from a woman who said, I think it's important to socially distance. There just isn't enough data or evidence as to what impact it can have on pregnant women. Unfortunately, a year later, we're much better informed, and we've got much better knowledge about the virus and the disease to know what is safe for women and for staff. And again, I was involved last year with talking to women who had booked for home births, and unfortunately in many areas home births were cancelled. Fortunately in our area that wasn't the case, but I was quite it was quite noticeable that lots of women were actually completely locking themselves away in their homes for months on end because they felt that that was the only safe way to keep themselves and their baby safe. And that's got huge implications for the way that they felt and those feelings of isolation. So women were already feeling isolated, and then we were building in antenatal care that reduced the amount of face-to-face contact on top of that. So we asked women about their experiences of virtual antenatal care, and that by virtual I mean either telephone checkups or using Zoom or using something else. And around half of the participants had experienced one of these virtual checkups with a midwife, and slightly fewer with the doctor. Very few women actually reported that they had trouble with the technology, but that may well reflect the women that actually found and completed an online survey as well. But what was concerning was that nearly 1 in 4 women actually said that they felt their needs were just not met at all by virtual antenatal care. And we really need to consider that. It's very easy for us to embrace this with real enthusiasm and to think that it may be a good way to deliver care. But we now know that actually we'll need to make more of an effort if we're going to do that in the future. And some women, okay, there were very few, I have to say, but some were actually very pragmatic about the whole thing. You know, this is how it is. We've just got to put up with it, and we've just got to accept it. And this woman said, it was nice. It's been nice to sit in the car and wait in the waiting room. Hang on, I'm just going to tell my husband not to put the kettle on 1 second. Oh, he's taking the kettle away, so it's okay. The joys. So this woman, yeah, was quite pragmatic about it, quite accepted that it had to be. But actually, even for women who accepted it, they recognised that actually it was a pretty lonely time to be pregnant. And women also felt they were worried that clinical care was getting missed. So this was a woman who felt that she wasn't getting blood pressure checks at the same rate, she was concerned that preeclampsia may get missed. And that's a really difficult thing to women to accept, to be told at the beginning of your pregnancy, we're going to do this because this is how we feel we can look after you safely and it's important, and then suddenly to have some of that care removed. And that's what we found, real concern amongst women. Another area which caused enormous distress to women and concern was the fact that their partners couldn't be with them at all for any of their pregnancy scans. And at the beginning of COVID, partners had no access to be with their partners during scans at all. And women told us just how distressing that was. It was distressing for women whose pregnancies were going completely well, but it was even more distressing for women who were told that they'd had a miscarriage without their partner support, and also for women who had perhaps previously had a pregnancy loss or had other issues that they really felt they needed their partner with them. But women were told us that that was an area of real distress, and I'm glad that that has now subsequently changed. But another concern that came across was that actually women who could afford to pay for private scans were going off and paying for private scans. So there was a real, so it was actually the women who were more deprived and less financially stable who are actually suffering more as a result of this. And that really can't be healthy for us. The other thing that was introduced was the concept that partners could join and come into the hospital once their partner was established in labour, so that partners and fathers couldn't be there for induction process or the beginning of labour. So women were needing to come into the hospital in labour by themselves, and only once they'd been confirmed to be in established labour could they phone out and their partner could join them. And again, this was causing real distress, along with the cancelling of home birth services. And in many units, midwifery-led units were also closed as they became COVID areas. Okay. So looking at postnatal care, this was an area in the United Kingdom. Postnatal care always comes out as the Cinderella service. Postnatal care always comes out as the one that gets missed out. And what was really sad was to see nearly 70% of women actually saying they were lonely on our postnatal wards or unhappy, and they felt they needed practical care. And this is something we really need to address. And there's stories there from women who were unhappy with their postnatal care. So what are we going to be doing about this? Well, things have changed. In all areas of the United Kingdom, partners can now go in at least for the booking scan and for the 20-week scan. But it is very much dependent on the hospital. In England, I think there's been more of a move and more of a direction from the chief midwifery officers to want to introduce visiting, but it does vary enormously. So I think we just need to continue to be very aware of these issues and to say, how can we safely, for mothers and babies and staff, get particularly partners and critical visitors back into our units, and to appreciate that partners are not visitors. They're essential to providing that high quality family-based care that we all want to give. So thank you.
Thank you, Julia. That was fantastic. I know that I've been very mean giving you only 15 minutes, both of you, because I know for both of you these are huge topics. And Julia, that's hot off the press. And I'm hoping you'll be able to speak to us at a later point further with more input as well. Well, both of you, fantastic. But I'm also conscious that we have a lot of audience. We've got apparently lots of dads and male midwives with us. So hello to you all this evening. One of them put out the first question, and that was from Scott Mayer, who says, can I ask Mark what support is out there for dads who are watching? And that may be shared by a few more dads watching.
Yeah, there's not specialist support at the moment. That, you know, perinatal, NHS England are changing under the new long-term plan. So if mum has postnatal depression, the father would be screened or supported for their mental health. So that's coming in. But unfortunately, you know, my argument's always been sometimes only dad is suffering, and it impacts, you know, we got to have this more, all parents should be supported. It's very patchy, you know. I know, you know, there's first sector organizations out there, you know, there's organizations like, for instance, Hub of Hope, and national like NHS mental health helplines, but they're more like Anxiety UK. When it comes to fathers, unfortunately, it's yet, but we're hoping that's going to change. Dad's Matter, Home Start, there's different organisations doing different works, but when it comes to perinatal mental health support, it's unfortunately not much there at the moment. But on a positive mind, I know a lot of fathers, please look at the Hub of Hope and the NHS and speak to your health visitor and your midwife, because they are there for you as well.
Okay, so that's your signpost for if you've got a problem. I mean, you've got a website, and I'm thinking that's got quite a bit of information. So if a dad wanted to get more information, that would be a way of getting it.
Take an email, yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I'm mostly trying to change policies now, but I do speak to dads, and even since COVID, unfortunately, father's been left in the car park for 2 or 3 days. Can't go home because they're gonna rush in, and and a lot of fathers just think they're just there to hold the bag, and
yeah.
I think it's just brought it to more attention now that the fathers are not there just hold bags. We're parents, and we need to support mum as best we can.
And I'm thinking actually from Julia's presentation and her description of one of the mums saying her husband was out in the car park. Now, I'm aware that often people will think if they're on their own, away from where the action is as it is, possibly their imaginations are a lot more dramatic than reality. So it's a lot worse. I don't know if that came through, Julia, when you were looking at some of the work.
Yeah, just the communication. We tended, I think it's very easy to assume that everyone's got their mobile phone and everyone's FaceTiming and Zooming with their partners. But there's nothing worse than being the person at home and worrying about, and time takes on a different dimension when someone you love is in hospital and you still haven't heard anything for hours on end. So sometimes it's actually for us to remind women to keep in touch, and to make sure that everybody knows, their mothers and their partners and everyone at home is aware, and to send and actually for us as well to make sure that we remind women to take those precious early photographs if the father can't be there. As much as we possibly can.
And I think that came through from both of your presentations in the importance of communication, and for us as midwives, making sure that we're helping the couple, whether they're same sex or man, woman, whatever, communicate with each other, because it is a huge life event they're going to have to get through at a strange time, I guess.
So yeah, definitely. Anyway. And so can I just mention, there's a lady, Helen, she lost her partner when she was through suicide when she was pregnant. I mean, and she's doing a lot of awareness raising, because like I said, I mean, so is happening daily, it's not just, and some of the stuff I've found over the last 10 years is and COVID has put even more pressures now on parents, even different pressure when I was a new dad, so yeah, it's huge.
No, that's great. Anyway, okay. We have Alison Nicol, who says, I'm sorry, everyone, I'm looking this way because all the questions are coming through on a different screen to me. So Alison, hi Alison, says, I missed the bit about the video Daddy Blues. When will this be released and where can I find it, please?
Oh, unfortunately, I didn't get Tom Cruise to play me, so it's an independent film. So he was in lockdown apparently, but no, he's but it's on Mark Williams FMH Twitter. It's a Dr. Pavanda Jill. She's a doctor and she's a film director as well. So just Google her as best. So it's coming out in March. I can share this.
March. Okay, well, make a note of that. Thank you very much, Mark. And we've got Ian Kemp. Hi, Ian. Is saying dads being involved from the outset has been a national recommendation since 2004. And if you listen to women since changing childbirth, 1993, you know your dates. And before, at what point is this going to change? A little frustration coming through from Ian. I don't know if you want to field that one, Julia.
Well, a lot has changed. And over the years, I think because as things change slowly, it's very easy to forget how much has actually changed. Many units, I'm talking outside of COVID now, welcome fathers and welcome partners, certainly if not only for very extended visiting, many welcome fathers to be staying overnight as well. And certainly it's very common now that fathers will stay and partners will stay throughout the whole induction process. That wasn't happening. Well, when Sue and I trained.
I thought you might say that, Julia, because I was thinking when I was training to be a midwife, fathers weren't in the birth room at all, actually, and it's not that long ago. So things have changed, but I think COVID has thrown everything a bit upside down, hasn't it, really?
Yes,
from that point of view.
For women, it's what feels right now, and actually women expect to be able to have their father to be with them, and that's become the norm. So to suddenly take that away overnight has been particularly hard, and we need to think, so how are we going to reintroduce and fathers back in?
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, it's interesting to think it may actually work the other way, that fathers are expected to be there and they really don't want to be there. And there may be some couples in which the couple have decided that maybe mum will be there rather than there for the father. But I don't know. I don't know if that's your experience, Mark. Have you had any fathers express that?
No, you're right. I think the pressure of the fatherhood has totally changed, and is having the right partners with mum, sport. But you're certainly right, especially if dad from a previous relationship, he hadn't told his current partner that he lost a child during pregnancy or whatever. Obviously, it's going to have a massive impact as well, and that's what happens sometimes. Some fathers, and as we know, during pregnancy, cortisol levels. If mum is stressed during pregnancy as well. And that's another reason why we got to look at fathers' mental health and support dads, because it just impacts on pregnant, and in the antenatal period of the baby, it's a whole thing. But going back to the question, you're right. Sometimes we need to ask: Are they prepared? Are we prepared enough? Even showing them things, emergency, cap 1, 2, 3. I know some people I won't like to think they use emergency C-section, but even those sort of language, talk to dad when he's out and explain to him. 5 minutes conversation it takes. Like, do you understand this is the process? This is what's going to happen. But unfortunately, in the fathers and the mothers who tell me, sometimes the fathers out there waiting in some services, I should say, that are not even talked to. Language. I mean, so I think things like that need to change. Definitely, it is changing. It is, on a positive, we are changing, but it depends on what service you're in as well. But perinatal mental health services, special services, that's what I love to see for fathers. A more specialist service, not third sector groups have to do it because there's nobody else doing it.
And I think that service might inform the maternity services better,
connect them,
to make us think. Because you actually, when you're talking about the Cat A and B, you sort of think we have, like every profession, and for those of you who aren't in midwifery who are watching, we all have our different language, and the language is, you kind of forget other people don't know your language when you're using it. So we need to be more aware of what the words we use. Absolutely. Right, I've got Edith KK says, I was in a meeting today for the East London Women's Experience Forum run by East London Health and Care Partnership, and they discussed more facility for frequently asked questions for partners and tactics used to allow them into scans, especially 20-week ones. What do you all think would be the best ideas and methods to use? So that partnership has talked about having FAQs.
Julia, do you want to go first? You all right?
I can. I'm not quite sure I understand. So I suppose it sounds like what's being asked for is more information. So women and their partners know more about what they're going into, information they need. And again, it comes down to language. Often, radiographers, midwife, the person doing the scanning, really, particularly for that 20-week scan, needs to concentrate on the screen. And sometimes that's perceived that there must be something wrong. And again, it's so important just to say, I am going to be looking at the screen for a few minutes. Just bear with me, and then I'll show you your baby, your baby in detail. And then everyone just relaxes and knows that that's normal. So yeah, information. And I always say, no woman has, or father or partner has ever complained that we gave them too much information.
No.
That midwife just went on and on telling me what's going to happen, every little detail. Yeah, please don't talk to women about your holidays unless they really want to hear about them. Yeah. But just keep giving every little scrap of information, because it's foreign. It's where we live. It's our home. We know everything that goes bing. But one bing can be a real trauma.
Very scary. Yeah, that's grand. Thank you.
Yeah, right. And so, at the moment, there's nothing on it. CG 1929 guidelines so far, no pathway. And I know some services are creating their own pathways as well, which is vital, because if the conversation does happen and dad is struggling, well, at least they got some sort of pathway. And I think health professionals will be more confident if they got that pathway as well, to actually where to put dad as well. So we need proper pathways to get this specialist or service for dads.
Okay, well, it's a good place to start.
And information on dads we need, because some organizations, they haven't even got information on fathers as well. So that's another thing, data and data, I should say, and all sorts of reasons why we should be doing that too.
Fabulous. Thank you very much. Now we've got a follow-up from Ian Kemp. Hi, Ian, who says, dads are an integral part of the parenting jigsaw. By excluding them, we're only providing part of the essential care. Happy to support Mark if required. There you are. You've got a follower now. Thank you, Ian. That's great. Okay, and we've got we are running out of time now, sadly. So I've got one comment to end, because it's been fantastic. We could keep on going this discussion forever. I know, and you're both fabulous because you're coming out with so much good information. But a nice comment to end on. Joy, now, Ifari Moyo, I hope I've done that correctly, Joy. This is so educative and informative, a great session. Thanks, Julia and Mark. So there we are. And we've had loads of people watching us, including people in Ghana. So hello, Ghana. I don't know what time of day it is in Ghana, but I bet it's late. So thank you very much for joining us. And this has been absolutely fantastic. I just need to do the thank yous to our fantastic speakers, Julia and Mark, who've given us, I know, edited highlights. We've been very mean. We haven't had as much as we'd like. But I think there's something about a Jane Austen saying that a good visit is where you're left wanting more and more, and we both want more and more. So fantastic, and thank you to our speakers. We just have to say we might be able to answer some questions on social media after this. I don't want to twist Julia or Mark's arms, but I bet they'll both be quite keen to make comments. Next week we're going to be looking at COVID-19 vaccine and some of the issues around that. So that's going to be us next week. So a huge thank you to everyone for watching and joining us this evening. Please take care of yourselves. Give all your loved ones an extra hug tonight, and we'll see you next week. Take care.
Thank you. Good night.
Bye. Good night.
Thanks for watching this video from the Maternity and Midwifery Forum. For more expert opinion and analysis, hit the button below to subscribe.